So, on to the questions, I think. I am absolutely fascinated to hear more about the process behind the shorts, the flash fiction every day,
Mm-hmm.
because I know you have written, you have done a similar project before, haven't you, with 365 log lines
That's right.
in a year. Have you noticed any particular, like any major differences between the two projects so far?
Yes. Um, there are a couple differences. This is certainly an outgrowth of that. I did enjoy that project. It forced me to be creative. And, a side benefit is my friends enjoyed it. And I actually still get inquiries about it. And I got jobs off that or interviews about it. So, I really enjoyed doing 365 log lines. And for those of you who might not be familiar, a log line is a one sentence summary of a film or TV show. And it's really important in screenwriting because you have to know the core of your story. And I mean, honestly, it's really important for any type of storytelling. It could be plays, it could be, short stories like we did today, it could be novels, just to know the core of your story. So here in 365 short stories, I thought I should expand on that. And, I'll tell you the impetus behind it. I didn't even know that my union would be on strike later in the year. No one knew.
That was
So
my
it was
follow-up
just,
question. Top notch. Nicely answered. Great. Go on.
yeah. Well, I wish I were that good at like sports betting or something like that. But I, it is really hard to get something made. I'm now making my short film, like I mentioned, at needfilm.com. I'm making this film with an amazing crew, and I've made other films in the past, and I've had, movie made here and there, and I've had podcasts made, and I've done award shows. So, but they're still so few and far in between. You write many scripts for every one that gets made, many scripts. And so I wanted to move into something where people can see the creativity and even more important, where the world, the characters, the entire story is done. It's done. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't need money. It doesn't need Netflix to, give a go ahead from 20 different executives. It doesn't need a crew, although I like working with my crews that I work with as a director. But it's done. In that moment, it's done. You create 100 words. I use Midjourney to make a piece of artwork, and then it's done. It's illustrated and it's a complete story, and I move on. And that's what I was hoping for, is something where I could just create worlds and get my ideas out into the world, especially those that maybe aren't big enough or interesting enough or, rich enough perhaps to support a whole film or TV series, but they are rich enough to support a 100-word short story. Yeah. So that's where that impulse came from.
I'm really in awe of the project. It seems, we write frequently. We write often. We write, up to 1,500 words for an episode, but we definitely don't write every day. And potentially, we should. There is definitely a school of thought which is predominant, I would say, in particular with the sort of more sort of authory end of writing, that you should write every day.
Well, to your point, I was kind of, as I started this project I started writing them before January 1st, but I started publishing on January 1st, 2023. I was kind of panicked at first. I was like, do I have enough ideas? Because, again, in screenwriting, you might have ideas, but then you expand on one idea and you might work on that for months, years.
Yeah.
And here I was just like, wow, am I going to have enough separate ideas where I can actually do this and pump something out every day? But the cool thing about daily writing is the more you write, the more you realize you have the capacity to write. The more ideas you put out in the world, the more ideas you come up with to share. So it's really been affirming. that I was able to write all these, and I'm pretty confident at this point that I'll be able to finish out the year and then some. Now I'm actually like, oh, should I go on to a year two? But that would be just a lot of writing.
Do
I
you use any prompts or random word generation or anything, or do you just reach into your
No,
brain every day and pull out an idea? That's crazy.
no, I don't use any prompts, and that's why I really appreciated your guys' podcast, because I was like, oh, okay, this gives me something to go on, because normally I'm just it's just going about my day. Honestly, it's just I hear something in the news, I encounter an interesting personality on the subway, I have some sort of nightmare, and I'm like, maybe I can turn that into a story. So I usually am just and I'm writing all of these down in a giant list, and I have hundreds of ideas that I haven't even used, and will not get to use in this particular project. So I don't use any sort of prompts. It's just what I encounter day to day and where my mind goes.
like that. I think that's a fairly authentic and true creative process, at least from my perspective and my experience. Just to
Mhm.
whatever latches, it's worth writing it down. Um,
Well, have you guys experimented with either AI, content generation, or a prompt generation, or anything like, or even
so
those calendars, like a prompt a day type of thing?
No, we've not used any AI at any point. It's been a fascinating thing watching it unfold. I mean, we've actually
Yeah.
seen a fairly nasty kickback on in the sort of like authorial Twitter sphere,
Yes.
from people doing uh, stuff like getting a mid-journey cover for their book, and that book then getting pretty widely uh,
Hmm.
cancelled, essentially. Um, I'm sort of
Yeah,
talking.
that definitely occurred to me, because one of the things, you know, that we are on strike about is AI, and can you just generate a new Marvel movie based on all the other
Mm,
Marvel movies, or
yeah,
that kind of thing. And so is using art, this art ethical, and and I do go back and forth on that. On the other hand, I make $0 and lose money on
mm,
365 short stories. So hopefully it's just a thing that just garners interest. But if I actually make this into a book or something, of course I would be using an author, an artist.
yeah. No, I'm not questioning your integrity on this at all. It's an interesting point, I think, because
Yeah.
as you say, your union is on strike, and part of the reason, that a little bit of that reason, is that the whole Chat GPT generating stories and such. But even in my sort of like hobby activities and stuff, I have used AI generated imagery,
Yeah.
Hmm.
um, loads, because it's one of the most exciting tools to come along. Well, for me, really, since I was a kid and introduced to the internet, this idea of just being able to plug something in and art pops out. Like I've never been artistic. Nico is the artist for the channel, and I've always marveled at the way that he can just bring something to life by drawing it,
Hmm.
and he thinks in a very visual way, and I don't. So somebody actually made a tool where you could write a description and then it pops out as art. That's so cool. It's just it would be really nice if it didn't mess anybody over at the same time. If
Yeah.
it's
Exactly. I think I'm the same way. I do think visually, for as a screenwriter and as a director, but I cannot draw to save my life. And so it is exciting to be like, I had something to do with this, but it's also deeply troubling if it is what I'm doing is taking away from other people.
I don't think it is. In all honesty, like at least from my perspective, and with what you're doing,
Mhm.
I think what you're doing is highly creative, and I think it's an interesting take on a tool. If anything, you're potentially opening up the conversation a bit more in an interesting way for
Yeah.
your guild. Um,
And as someone who is regularly doing illustration, I use it as a tool, even if it's just to say I want to draw X thing, but I'm struggling to look at angles or how things would look. It's really cool to be able to create reference images to work
Mhm.
from
Mhm.
and just have them fit, because you can imagine a thing, but when you start drawing or writing or whatever, it might just vanish because you're putting something else in its place. And I think what's the big thing with AI is it should be something that's in the toolkit that you can deploy. Like I know a lot of people who work in code who there are things that you have to do all the time and it will just give you that string of code immediately. That's brilliant because you're just deploying a tool. You still need to understand what you're doing. I think the only time we need to worry about it is when, for example, like we're worrying about now in the screenwriting world, is if they think, well, we won't need actual writers, should we just make a computer steal their old work and shuffle it about a bit? So I think it's gonna come down to
It's not just the screenwriting world. Today, I read an article saying that among others, George R. R. Martin is suing ChatGPT for using his works as base material to learn from.
Oh wow.
Yes, I think there are a number of such lawsuits, and
Yeah.
I'm like, am I playing into this I mean, I guess all of us are who publish even this audio that we're doing right now is this training voice chat or story writing bots, etc.
Yeah. I do. So one of the ones that fascinates me is this, with like getting people's voices and then having them do covers of songs
Oh
through
yes,
AI.
I've heard about
So
that.
like some of them, I'm like, oh, that's funny, but I think it was Post Malone. I saw an interview talking about how
It was a Rogan
that we're
episode.
getting to a point. Or was it? Because I only saw it as a clip. Talking about, we're getting to a stage where someone could be like, well, I want a Post Malone song about this thing that's very specific to me, and AI can make it for them. And if
Yeah.
it can do that, why should they care about the music you're actually making yourself because it's not theirs? And while, there's a load of recorded music of me out there, and I would love to like see the process of like what could it make me sing, like because I could just sing it myself anyway. Probably.
What would be the most egregious thing for some sort of AI whiz to make your voice sing?
What I don't know what would. It's just something hateful, I guess.
All right, okay, no, but like in like a fun sense rather than like an actual sense.
Oh, I think it would be really fun to like have me doing some like proper like the teenage girl K-pop stuff. I would love to hear that with proper like
Gravelly
heavy rock gravel on it. Yeah, I think that would be hilarious.
I like it.
Yeah, and again, I think if we're using these things as a tool in our toolkit, in fact, if we don't use it as a tool in our toolkit, we are, you're letting other people, other creators will get ahead of you. But at the same time, if you are replacing all of your crew and if we're just automating everything that way, I don't think it's going to create really good art, which is one reason that I personally haven't, and maybe this is me being naive, but I haven't felt too worried because I haven't seen any sort of writing that would actually replace creative screenwriting or creative storytelling. That said, it's only the first year or so. We're going to get much farther very, very quickly.
I think so. I mean, I've already started to see in submission guidelines, either for open calls or for competition submissions. There has started to be a line added, which is that if any of this story is AI generated, not only will you be disqualified from this, but you will also be barred from future submissions. So I think people across the pond in different areas are taking it really seriously, and potentially rightly so, but it is a really fucking cool tool, so hopefully we can all get on and work out how to use it properly. But that's actually not the main thrust of your strike, is it? I mean, what is your take on the current strike and where we're at the moment?
We're all hopeful that it will end soon. The main thrust of it is that the streamers are making billions of dollars off of writing and assert that they have no money to pay the writers and no money to pay the actors. And and we all know, based on even just basic numbers, even without knowing their actual their actual viewership per project, which they will not share, probably because their stocks would tank if people knew the answer.
Yeah.
We know that's not true. We know that there is money that should be that they wouldn't, Apple TV wouldn't exist, Prime wouldn't exist, Netflix wouldn't exist. Obviously, the studios, Sony and Disney and so on, would not exist without creativity. And so it's a fight to say you've built this on the backs of our labor. You built these billions of dollars. The executives are paid dozens or hundreds of millions of dollars. So there's really nothing to share, the percentages are laughably small that we are asking for, and it's not even in line with inflation. It's lower than inflation. So it's just we're asking for crumbs, and they're kicking us for that simple ask.
If I was to try and explain one of the bits that I found particularly egregious, would you be up for just clarifying it and make sure I'm not getting the wrong end of the stick?
I will try. I'm not. My expertise is screenwriting, not necessarily union negotiations. But let me try.
Yeah. It's an awful thing that you're all having to go through, and it's something that I've been paying reasonably close attention to. But I'm not on the inside, so I'd really value any take that you have on it. So my understanding is that the way that TV shows and movies used to work is that a writer would get paid every time that episode appeared on TV or was or movie was played on TV or appeared in the cinema. And these are called residuals, aren't they? When when you get the repeat watches. And as far as I'm aware, no residuals are being paid for any show being played on any streaming platform to any writers.
As far as I'm aware, yes, you are correct. It is either low or no. It's. I think there are sometimes a few pennies paid, but basically it is no residuals because that was the deal the Writers Guild worked out last time, and it was better than nothing, basically.
Right.
And same with actors, but now it's at the But then that was at sort of in 2007, 2008 when this was nascent, and now it is boomed into these. These are literally the biggest companies in the entire world, Apple and so on. So there's an Amazon. So there's no excuse that they wait. You really don't know the numbers. You really can't pay every time something is aired, and it just seems like this labor is being exploited, right? Because it's like you are writing it for usually a small sum. Sometimes that can pay something, but then you don't know if you'll get another job for years. So writers have historically relied on residuals, and those residuals are what the streamers did not agree to, and now there has to be some accountability for how much they have continued to profit off of that labor that they are able to exploit ad infinitum. They're able to do it forever if they want to.
Yeah.
Oh well, thank you for taking us through that. That must be tough because obviously the strike has been going on for a really long time. So
a really long time, and a lot of people are hurting. And at the same time, we'll keep going as long as we have to. There's a lot of spirit. I've really met some amazing people on the picket line, and so and just you see the community that's out there, and I've never seen the community as strong as it is now. So we're happy to keep going.
Very glad to hear that.
Me too.
Yeah, but just to bring it back to the fiction, it's interesting because something I do that I may or may not have mentioned is that I am a script coach. So I coach people through screenwriting. And a lot of my clients now are moving into novels. So the cool thing is that my delve into fiction, and I had clients who were novelists before, but my delve into fiction with 365 short stories and with your podcast and so on has helped me help them. And I think it's just this push to say, like, I don't want to be at the mercy of, if you are traditionally a screenwriter, I don't want to be at the mercy of these executives and of these companies where, you hear all these stories, and this has happened to me, this has happened to every single writer I know, where you develop something for free for years and you're writing 20, 50 versions of a script, you're taking notes because you don't want to be hard to work for. You don't want to be hard to work with.
Yeah.
Right? So you're doing all this work, and then that executive moves on, and all that work was for naught. Or the funding is pulled, or they decide they're going in a different direction, all that work was for nothing. And so one of the ways to empower yourself is by writing fiction. And that's something where we can have domain over this world. And that's what got me into that. That was the impetus behind 365 short stories in the first place.
I think you definitely end up with something that's your own at the end of the day, regardless of whatever happens. But we have had some fairly nasty harrowing, really, stories from guests where they have actually had similar situations with novels. With, they've been writing with an editor for a very long time at a publishing house, working on a novel. That editor moves to a different publishing house, and then nobody wants to pick up their novel.
Yeah.
Yes.
It just gets lost in the cracks, even though they had essentially a development deal at a publishing house, and then it just goes. So it's a very vulnerable profession, it seems, and that's potentially putting it extremely lightly. At least when you're writing fiction, you have a whole story that's your own. At the end of the day, you can do something with it in the future.
Exactly, and I feel for those. Yeah, I feel for. Well, let me just say all writers, all artists. And the thing, and I guess I'm sure this is true also in the novel writing world and the fiction writing world, but certainly in screenwriting, just from my experience, you often develop a project at the behest of a specific executive, and they're like, I have the rights to this novel, or I have the rights to this person's life story, or I have the rights to this board game or toy, whatever, Hot Wheels cars, whatever it is. And so you're writing, or Barbie, right? And you're writing, and even if speaking of that, if there's the history of Barbie, there have been so many different writers who came in and got fired over I think well over a decade before this movie came out.
You've worked with one of them, haven't you? Is one of them was Amy Schumer, I think, was one of the Barbie.
Oh, so one of the awesome jobs that I've been very lucky to have is writing for comedians because I'm a writer for the Writers Guild Awards on the East Coast every year. And so Amy Schumer is one of the people I've gotten to write for, and that's such a blast because you get to write for so many people in one evening, and you're working on it for months, and then you have no idea of what material they'll actually take. And you don't know if it'll be yours, you don't know if it will be, a fellow writer's, you don't know if they'll just wing it. And so it's always kind of, you're on pins and needles, and it's really exciting and fun, and it's always a really incredible evening of basically writers and comedians talking to other writers and comedians.
Oh, it sounds awesome.
It's an incredible room. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to start bringing in some questions, because I feel like now might be a good time for this one. What's the first thing you wrote that meant something to you?
Ooh, what a great question. Hmm. You know, that is interesting. This is gonna kill me because we had to write when I grew up in San Jose, California, and in the Bay Area. And for my school, we had to write books. We had to write a book, which was actually, a short story. There were probably a few sentences per page times 20 pages, maybe. So it ended up being a short story, and we had to illustrate it ourselves and ink it ourselves and everything. And those books were probably the first time that I remember really being proud of, like, wow, and then they would bind them. They would bind them in hardcover. You draw the illustration on the front. They would seal it in a hardcover copy. So we still have those books. Oh, that was the name of the one I was proud of. If I remember correctly, it was called Lonely Jeffrey. It was about a lonely boy named Jeffrey. And I just remember feeling it was hard work, but so proud of it because you have a complete product at the end of the day. And it took the better part of the whole school year. This is when we were in, second grade, third grade, fourth grade. But you came out with this product, and maybe that's what got me hooked on writing, because people enjoyed reading my story, and they enjoyed reading Lonely Jeffrey. And this is, again, this kind of came from that similar impulse of like, I miss that, where you have a whole story, it's illustrated now with AI, which no one who could have seen that coming.
Yeah.
But and you, at the end of the day, you have a product. It's exactly what you guys are saying. You have something that is uniquely yours. If other people like it, great. If they don't, you still have something that you can treasure and be proud of. And so that's the first story I remember being proud of.
I think there's a big thing. I've talked about it quite a lot on the podcast, but there's this sense for a lot of people that you can't create something unless you're selling it. And I think being able to have things that you've, like a book you wrote in school that means something to you without it ever needing to make you $1 million. That's such a lovely thing. Not to say you shouldn't sell writing. You should. Please pay us. We're begging all of you. But
me too. But yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's we do have this sense of like, well, why work on this project if it's non-commercial, or if I haven't already sold it? And I get that. Like, we need to eat, we need to pay rent, you need to gas up your car or whatever. But at the same time, for my clients, the clients I work with, the clients I consult on for their scripts or their books or their plays, they are most successful when they just create something that is theirs, that they don't care if it sells. They're just like, I have to say this. I have to do this. Maybe this isn't my genre. Maybe this isn't my strength. Maybe this isn't even the mode of writing. Like, for me, the mode of writing that I'm not paid for is fiction. The mode of writing that I'm paid for is screenwriting. But it's like, so what? Just do it and just put it out there. And what's the worst that could happen is you have something you're proud of and no one sees it, and you can look back on it and be like, that was a really interesting, difficult, but rewarding at the end of the day process.
I'm in awe of your answers to all of these questions, because we are putting you on the spot to a certain degree, but you're so bloody eloquent, my friend. It's going really well.
Thank you.
This is
you guys ask great questions.
Oh, well, you're going to really like this one.
It's all about to change.
This is
right, that could all fail in this moment.
Yeah. So I'll hand it over to the alien.
Yeah, to our little friend who we've now seen a mummified version of you from Mexico, and the US government tells us you are real. How are you?
Oh, I'm very well, thank you. Hello, human named Timothy.
Hello.
Now, if I were to abduct you and offer you a choice, either I will probe you, or you may give me a book to read to better understand you. Are you going to give me a book, or perhaps the probe?
Well, how enjoyable is this probe?
Listen, honey. I've never heard any complaints.
I mean, I'm open to it. But if I had, I'll take the probe, and while I'm being probed, I will recommend a book that I enjoyed recently. And it's a novella, and I wonder if someone else has recommended this already to you. It's called Feed Them Silence by Lee Mandello. And this was recommended to me by one of my students, actually. And it's really different. In fact, if anything, I was trying to channel that a tiny bit with the short story that I read to you today, although it's about an utterly different topic. but it is, in a sense, similarly, I would argue, unresolved in certain ways. It explores science, it explores this speculative fictional science, while and doesn't actually reach a conclusion. It sort of allows you to draw your own conclusions, which I found super daring. And it's about a professor, a doctor, who creates a neurological interface with wolves, in the wild.
That sounds
Yeah,
great.
yeah. I would be shocked if they don't make this into a movie or TV series, but because it's such a cool idea. And as you can imagine, this doctor becomes obsessed with and addicted to the feeling of being a wolf, especially because it helps her escape from her own marriage, which isn't going so well. So the more, and of course, it drives her marriage to go even worse. So it's really brilliant, and the science, as with I would say, as with the stories we all read today, the character comes first, and the science or speculative fiction aspect is kind of just a tool to aid our understanding of this character's tortured journey. So that's my recommendation to you, Alien.
I feel like the
Wow.
alien's going to get misled. They're going to think that you have the power to commune with wolves, which I'm actually okay with, because we should always try and misdirect aliens wherever possible.
I was half concentrating because of the act of probing, but if I'm getting it right, you are having a bad marriage because you want to sleep with a wolf.
I mean, you got some of the words correct in there.
Oh,
so.
good.
So I think you can see why we need to preface that question each time.
I hope I answered it satisfactorily.
Please, yeah, no, it's.
I am satisfied.
So am I.
I actually have a little bit of a follow-up question there, just to do with your location, because you are based in Brooklyn, right?
In Brooklyn, correct? Yes.
Are you sort of? I assume you are, like, in the sort of film scene in New York, because I follow a YouTuber called Patrick Willems, who's also based in.
I'm not familiar with Patrick Willems.
Hmm.
Should I be?
Well, I mean, I think you might get a kick out of it. That he sort of went viral many years ago for a Wes Anderson style short flick that he did, uploaded to YouTube, and then of course this recent wave of AI generation. Some of that has actually been Wes Anderson imitations.
A lot of it has been obsessed with Wes Anderson. I agree.
Yeah. So he's recently put out a video about AI in filmmaking, and I thought that might be potentially something that would be up your street. So I thought I'd mention it.
I thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, the film community here is incredible. It's raw, it's independent, it's scrappy. It's very different from the one in LA, which I like too. It's just a very different feel, and I have business in both cities, but I love the community in New York, and I love the unity and solidarity that we've seen in the past months surrounding this strike. We're all in it together.
I think it's a lovely place in the world. I visited very briefly. I spent a day in Brooklyn just before the pandemic, and it was really, really nice. I think I'd managed to get quite stressed out in Manhattan, and Brooklyn was a real a place where I felt like I could breathe, and I really enjoyed it. It's not actually in Brooklyn, but I also went to the Museum of the Moving Image, which is just inside Queens, I think.
In Queens, yes.
And I went to the Brooklyn Brewery, and had a slice by the bridge, and I just thought this is a really nice place to live and breathe. Do you feel like that's obviously that's a very touristy outlook, but is that something that is?
No, but I feel like it's accurate. I started living in Manhattan when I first moved here, and I was there for like 5 years or something. But once you get to Brooklyn, you don't look back because there is, in most parts, there is just more space. There's more trees. There's more a sense, in my opinion, of community. There's, although this is changing, there's fewer giant buildings and more neighborhoods. So, I mean, I was in Manhattan. I came back from Manhattan for this, picketing, and I came back for this. But and I love Manhattan, and I'm there many times a week. But Brooklyn, and especially the neighborhood where I am, which is where we are, which is Fort Greene, it's just so beautiful. There's parks, there's sunsets, there's dogs, there's families, and you just feel like I think you summed it up perfectly. You can breathe here.
You can breathe. Oh, that's lovely. Lovely.
That was lovely. Right. Let's put the pressure on again. Now that the alien's gone. Other writers, who inspires you?
Well, the first person who comes to mind is probably Ted Chiang, who wrote Story of Your Life and Others, which was very formative for me, or Stories of Your Life and Others, which then one of those stories was, well, that specific story within the book that had the same name was called the short story was called Story of Your Life, and the book was that a collection that it was in was Stories of Your Life and Others, and that one short story became Arrival, which I think is just a beautiful story and script and movie by Denis Villeneuve, and it just showed how much you could do with, which actually, so I think his stories are just gorgeous to read. They're so evocative. They're so brilliant. They take such a sideways approach that you wouldn't, they never take the obvious approach to speculative fiction. But in fact, I was inspired. This gives me a chance to shamelessly plug again my Kickstarter, my fundraising campaign for my film, which is again needfilm.com, KNEADFILM.com, as in kneading dough, and yes, as in needing to find your freedom, needing to find your voice, needing to figure out who you are. It's about a woman who's doing all those things, and she's an amateur baker. And I was inspired by Story of Your Life, which later called Arrival, because that was one of the first films I remember, that and E.T., honestly, where the alien, it's not about an alien who's trying to, just kill us and we have to defeat them, and, the America comes together and kills, or the world comes together and murders them or whatever. It's about these yeah, exactly. It's about benevolent aliens, and we see them as a threat. We use them to help, to justify our goals of war or domination or power. And I was really inspired by that. And I will say that this is my film, which is called Need, KNEAD. Was also about, or will also be about, people who, it's my first film with aliens, and but it's a comedy, and it's about what happens when these aliens land and seem to inspire everyone to live their best life, figure out who they are, realize their deepest dreams and desires. And it happens as soon as these aliens land, everyone is inspired, everyone is transformed across the world, except for our main character, this one woman, this amateur baker, who tries everything to get infected or whatever these aliens are doing to everyone, and she can't catch it. And so it's about what she does when she finds herself in that situation, when she also has dreams, but these aliens won't help her realize them.
That is an absolutely banging concept, my friend.
Thank you.
That's going places.
We don't do. You don't need to say it's a shameless plug. We don't do shame here. I don't know if you recall, but about 5 minutes ago, I was doing an alien voice and pretending to put something up your bum. So
fair enough.
Say whatever
you
feel like.
Right. What I said pales in comparison to that.
But you could add that to your movie. I'm just saying. More bum stuff.
Okay. You know what? I'll put it in the hopper of ideas to consider.
I mean, I wouldn't try to appeal to the British market too much. We're not very large.
But great, some amazing fiction. Obviously, amazing. Well, that doesn't need to be said. Theater and film tradition. So always inspired. You never know.
You never know.
Pinewood is in earshot from here, so you have to be careful.
Oh,
Famously broke Harrison Ford's leg, right?
Yeah, they
is that true?
Yeah. Or you could go to the Bond stage if it's not on fire, which it often is. Right. Speaking of going to the Bond stage,
is that true? It catches.
That's all true. Yeah.
It's caught fire multiple times. Yeah.
Maybe they need to change the materials made out of or something.
Look, petrol makes good glue if you leave it long enough, and wood is cheap. So we'll carry on doing what we're doing. Thanks.
Okay. I look. My expertise again is words on a page, not nails in wood or something like that.
So, what is your next project?
Well, it is definitely this film, needfilm.com. That is we're going to film that in November, so in less than a month and a half.
It's very soon.
Very soon. So before and after this, I was on calls with my team, and thankfully that is something that we are permitted to do. Those are non-struck contracts. They are not related to the Writers Guild strike nor the SAG-AFTRA strike, so they are both explicitly allowed. Short films are they both explicitly allow short films. I just want to preface it for anyone who has any hesitation. We're not, not doing anything illicit.
No, I also checked that we weren't. I checked the guidance from the guild, and we are all good here.
Yes, podcasts are good. Fiction is good, and then beyond that, I am always, I feel like I have all these. In a sense, I have all these children, and they are the products that my students make because they are always making movies and TV shows and getting staffed in writers' rooms and doing stand-up comedy specials and getting onto late night shows and stuff. So I'm really proud to work with amazing clients. And so I would say if you want to see what I do, you can go to blueprintscreenwritinggroup.com. And I think I will say that my next project, I mean, I'm always working on a million different projects, different writing different pilots for different companies once the strike ends. But I would love to do, I will tell you guys this, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the industry, but it is so much work, fundraising, casting, locations, etc., to make a short film that my producers and I are just saying to each other, next time we're just going to make a feature film. Next time it's the same amount of trouble to make a short film as to make a feature film. Yes, it's more expensive, but it's actually easier to fundraise in some ways because you still need money, but people are willing to invest in it versus a short film, which is not a great investment. So I'm
swinging for the fences like that is a really cool idea. I think that's
So during the strike, thank you. So during the strike, I've been working on a feature that I'm really excited about in a way that I haven't before, because it's going back to what we said earlier. It's doing something that I think is outside of my wheelhouse. It's not I normally write comedy. I write for comedians. This is going to be probably funny, but it's more action thriller. So I'm very excited about it, and I think it can be done on a low budget. So this is the project I'm going to bring to my producing team next, and hopefully you'll see something more about that in the coming, once the strike ends, let's say that.
Once the strike ends. I think it was Vince Gilligan, the showrunner for Breaking Bad, that began casting actors that were previously comedians, because he said that that comedians had the best dramatic timing. So I think
I totally agree.
To take your sort of more comedic instincts over into action thriller. I feel like that's a winning combination.
Yes, and in this Alien short Need Film, I am going to be casting comedians as well. It is funny, but it's also probably the most serious thing I've written at the same time, and I'm going to be casting comedians for that exact reason. Exactly what Vince Gilligan said. I've had, and I didn't even mention, but my training in I never actually studied writing in school really. If anything, I studied at Upright Citizens Brigade, which you may or may not be familiar with, but it's improv comedy, and so I'm very comfortable working with comedians and improvisers on the set, and I think that really can lead to fantastic. I hope it leads to fantastic dramatic work as well as comedic work, because you're just used to making stuff up, or you're used to improvising. You're used to working with no script, which has oddly helped me with my fiction, even with the story I wrote today. Just starting somewhere and saying, I don't know where this is going to go, but I'm going to have to be comfortable with it, and I'm going to just agree with whatever I have written and keep moving forward.
Comfortability.
Just let the impulses take you. Yeah, yes, and your way to a story.
Yes,
exactly.
yeah, that's the whole.
Yes,
that's the whole thing.
100%.
I feel like we've really connected on how to tell stories here, which is it's made me sort of have a bit of a warm feeling inside, because obviously you've been doing you spent most of your career screenwriting and writing for comedians, and we've only relatively recently started writing short fiction. But the idea that this is just how it works, and at the end of the day it's all about connecting and trusting your impulses, it makes me feel very nice. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm just so blown away by both of your stories, and the creativity, and and just the characterization, that the empathy in that is really where all stories can succeed or die, and yours both succeeded brilliantly.
Thank you. It's very kind. Before we let you go, can you just tell people again where they can keep up to date with you, where they should go for any advice or to just see your thoughts?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So the first place you should go is needfilm.com, and that's need as in kneading dough, so KNEAD film.com. The second place you can find me and what I do and read more about me is Blueprint Screenwriting Group, blueprintscreenwritinggroup.com. And then if you just want to follow me on Instagram, it's Timothy Michael Cooper, and that's my first, middle, last name, so you can follow me there. Wonderful. And those are some great places to keep up to date with what I'm doing, and you can even say hi on any of those platforms, and I always respond. I always like to hear from people.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you for your time, thank you for your story, and thank you for your insight. It's all been fantastic.
And thank you guys. You guys are really great hosts, and I feel like I really got to connect with you, and I really appreciate that, and I love what you guys are doing, and I hope you never stop doing it.
Well, we'll try our best. The same to you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For magnificent beardery, let's cast the Chinicus folliculale spell on Gary Laird. For rich ginger tones on the scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
how do you come up with that shit, man?